Hello, this is David from DN Cognitive Counseling. Tonight we have a question from Val on the videos, is honesty always the best policy? Val says, I love both the videos. They were both spot on and amusing as well. I would like to look at this from a different angle as far as honesty and about certain things about yourself. For example, a mental health diagnosis or issues you're struggling with. Is not telling those things considered being dishonest? How does this sort of fit in here? Val, that's an excellent question. A lot of times people feel they have to give everybody all their information. Now, if you've ever been to a hospital or any sort of medical clinic, you sign papers. One of them is called HIPAA. HIPAA is the regulations that state there are laws that protect your confidentiality. You have a right to privacy. We actually all have that right. We have that right until it infringes on somebody else's right. I'll give you a couple of examples. Say, for example, that you are abusing your child. You'll say, well, I have a right to privacy, except that you're infringing on your child's right not to be hurt. Or you say, I want to kill myself. Well, you lose your right to privacy because at that point, even if you think that you're rational, the idea is that you're not in the right state of mind to make those determinations and decisions, so you lose your right to privacy. But barring hurting yourself or anybody else, you have a right to privacy. So I want you to think about this. What do you do, or what happens when you don't want to disclose information to people and they ask you questions? Well, one of the things you could say is, listen, that's not a subject I want to talk about. You don't have to say no. You don't have to answer the question. You could say that's really not appropriate to ask. Somebody says to you, how much money do you make? Not an appropriate question. What was the last time that you had sex with your wife? Not really an appropriate question. So the nature by which somebody asks you something, you have the right to say, no, stop for a second. You're overstepping a boundary. And there are a lot of nice ways of telling people they've overstepped boundaries. There are many people out there who overstep boundaries. So at times people feel guilty because they don't share, especially when there's been a question asked. But it's not incumbent upon you to have to share information that you don't feel comfortable sharing. Now, if your information is going to affect them, example, you have an STD and they want to be intimate with you and you don't tell them, that's immoral. I know certain states have laws against it, other states do not. But that's an immoral act on face value. Not to tell somebody that they're exposing themselves to something while they're engaging with you in something, that's not right to do. So that would then be an issue of disclosure. Supposing somebody wants to marry you, or they want to get very serious in the relationship, and then you don't disclose, that becomes problematic. Now the question becomes, what if you have the potential for something? You don't have it, but there's a potential for it to happen. You have a pre-genetic disposition for breast cancer. Do you need to say, by the way, I have this genetic predisposition, it may happen? And that, I think the answer is absolutely no. Because we all could get something. Things could happen. It's not that you definitely have it, and you don't know if you will get it. So disclosing that could be detrimental when you don't have something. The potential for something is not the same as having something. That's like somebody saying to their potential spouse, well, I may not be able to have children because we've had difficulties in the family. Again, that's not something that needs to be disclosed. It's not direct to something that you know. It's maybe. And anytime you have maybe, well, maybe that's going to happen to you. I've had, when I used to work in hospice many years ago, I had clients all the time that would say to me, I hope I will see you next time. And what they were basically saying to me is, I may die before I see you the next time. I remember saying to a lot of them, I hope I get to see you next time too. Nobody's promised tomorrow. Even though they have a diagnosis that says they are, they have less time in terms of the diagnosis saying that they're going to die soon, does not necessitate they're going to die before. Bad things happen. Where I worked, very shortly after, there was somebody that died from an accident. And nobody thought it was coming. Nobody knew. But we know these things happen in life. So the idea is nobody's promised tomorrow. We like to think that we have a lot of certainty. We like to think we know everything. When in reality, we deal with a lot of uncertainty, which is the reason why so much of us deal with anxiety. Because we're trying to control things that we have no control over. So the idea of disclosure does not need to take place. You don't need to tell everybody your emotional states. You don't need to tell everybody what your history has been. When you get to know them, they should know what they are dealing with. If they're accepting of it, great. If not, they have to move on. I deal with many people that have an STD, some not curable. And the discussion of disclosure takes place when that becomes necessary. Get to know me first. Then you could decide whether or not you want to go with that risk or not. But not from the get-go of the judgment of saying yes. Right? Disclosing that to people automatically. Could you imagine walking with a sign on you saying, I suffer by bipolar disorder. Would you like to date me? Or I suffer with herpes. Would you like to date me? The automatic reaction is going to be, wait a minute, no. But by getting to know people, people overlook many things once they get to know you. Once they have that ability to develop a relationship, then it gives you the ability to look past those things. The same thing is true of what people make, right? I have no job and right now living with mom. Not too many people are going to date you. I mean, it does happen, but not too many. But eventually those things come out, and then as people get to know people, they can make decisions of what they'll accept and not accept. But it's not your job to disclose everything and be walking around with those signs. So the mental illness, medical issues, are all things that could be kept private. All things where you put that limit and boundary. And then, when it becomes a situation where that other person is now entitled to know, where it crosses that line, and again, this is gray of where that line is. Sometimes people will be like, wait a minute, you should have told me this before. And they will feel that way. And they're entitled to feel that way. But you're entitled to hold back until you think it's appropriate and you think that there's an idea that they can actually hear what you're saying without judging you in the manner on face value. I hope that you like this video. I hope that you'll share it with other people. If you disagreed with me, and I'm sure that people could on this particular issue, if you disagree with me, please tell me why, and I'd love to hear your response. And again, if you haven't, please subscribe. And if you want to become a patron to this endeavor, hit the Subcribe-star link. Thank you very much. Have a good night and good mental health.